Hello, it's Noel Vortex, and today I'm doing a book review of a book called The Cost of Saving the World, which is an interesting title by Kieran Tait. I'll do a full disclaimer before going into this. I'm just going to talk about my first reading of the book and a little bit of analysis of it. But this is I would stress that this is an early stage reading of the book. This is not me having read it, reread it 4 or 5 times. This is just the first reaction type of review. So I'll do a disclaimer as well. I know Kieran. I've met him in real life. I haven't known him for a long time, but I actually I guess knew about some of the ideas of this book before it was actually a book, because when I first met Kieran, he was talking about some of the ideas that he expresses in the book, The Cost of Saving the World. So I have a little bit of a familiarity with the subject matter that's explored in the subject matters that are explored in the book. I'm going to do my best with energy-wise today with this recording, sorry, but we're currently going for the heatwave in the UK as well, so I'm burning up. Like, it's so much. Anyway, onwards. So the book itself is available on Amazon. I'll put the link below. It's available so you can read it on a Kindle as an ebook as well, I think. So it's not really that long. It's 45 pages long. I think roughly it took me about half an hour to read the whole thing. But I would also say that it's short, but quite a lot of density in terms of the ideas of being explored. It is. I think I would describe it as a combination of a fiction story and a philosophical essay. Actually, it's just that the philosophical ideas are being explored and really described through a fictional story. But in a lot of ways, it's actually more a philosophy essay. Maybe in the same way that something like this book Zarathustra was by Nietzsche, for example. So this book Zarathustra by Nietzsche is a story, but it's sort of a parable basically. But it's also used as a base for his philosophy of the Übermensch basically. And I think in a similar way, maybe that's what Kieran's going for here, because there is a lot of high-end deeply philosophical concepts, but also economics. Economics actually plays a huge part of the discussions in the book. Now that's not to say it's not still accessible. Actually, the first few chapters are, I think, designed to be accessible, because the story starts with the common man, who is a sort of everyman for a disenfranchised, in his case, in receipt of welfare benefits, or dealing with disability issues and everything. But the common man at the start represents the everyman, which is what I got from it. The story essentially is split into 3 parts as well. So there might be minor spoilers here, but I want to try and keep major plot points, out of it. But just a warning, if these are minor. So basically the starts with this uncommon man. It's a description of a depression, mental health issues he's experiencing as a result of, living in basically what is a society very similar to our own. The story itself is set in 2042, so it's set not that much, it's the near future basically. And then there's the second part, which is the main philosophy meaty part, which is basically these 2 figures who are involved in economic systems, having this long form discussion, which goes on for quite a long time. I'll read an extract from that actually, because I feel it's probably going to be a good idea to give you a sense of some of the ideas that are explored in the book. So this is an extract from chapter 4, Revelations of Value. So like I said, there are many chapters of this book which are basically essentially the philosophical essays on a proposed economic restructuring of the world, but it's basically through a fictional story. But anyway, let's just start. Hal swayed back and forth giddily in a childish fashion. The value of wood is not just my concern, it's the value of legal tender, of money, of all things. Out of his pocket came a rusty old coin which could have easily been a century old. He twiddled it between his fingers and flipped it into the air. Since its conception, money has represented the placeholder of value, a means of exchange for man, regardless of their background, their culture, and their prejudices. To trade with one another within a free marketplace, economics. Yet, money would be worthless without it trying to represent the value of other things, merely a social construction, a piece of useless metal. And, okay, so, I won't go on too much, but there's a lot of ideas in there, basically. Like, I might do a separate video where I really dive into the philosophy side of things in here, because there's actually a lot to chew on. Considering the length of the book, it's good in the sense that it does fit a lot into the 45 pages. I think it's probably fairly accessible. The problem you'd obviously have with a book about, it's essentially about, it's a story which is about economics and philosophy, basically, is accessibility. Now, I think so. A lot of the ideas will go over some people's heads, but if you have any, even just like fundamental knowledge in history, politics, and some knowledge of economics and how, probably Marxist economics as well as like capitalists, Adam Smith or whatever, then you're not going to struggle too much with the concepts explored here. But your average Joe might a bit, actually. But then I think probably you're the type of person who will buy a fictional book about this subject is probably going to be someone who's interested in the subject anyway. So yeah, and then the third part is basically the character Hal, who is, and the second part is having this conversation. It's a long form philosophical conversation. He basically takes his ideas to the public, and he gets asked a lot of questions by journalists, which I think represent the common questions anyone would have in regards to if you want to radically overhaul, the economic systems that the world functions under. Now, a lot of this might sound quite dry. I think probably, in some ways, it is dry, like in some ways, but it's considering this is Kieran's first published book, as far as I'm aware. I think he's written before, but not published anything. But it's actually easy to read. I didn't struggle reading or understanding what was going on. Sentences well constructed. I think I've spotted one or two minor errors, but they were so minor as to not, diminish my enjoyment of the text. Also, it's very hot today, so maybe I might have just even mistakenly read it because it's so hot that I'm just like almost delirious. So yeah, in terms of how it's written well. And yeah, I think more like the only thing I'd say as a criticism is that sometimes, and this is a hard thing to get right because it just is, but sometimes because they, there's two men discussing philosophical ideas, writing dialogue that seems naturalistic. Sometimes it can feel like it was some of the dialogue. I found this more in the third part actually than the second part. The second part actually was well crafted and felt naturalistic in a lot of respects because that's two characters talking, about these high-minded ideas and it's about saving the world and everything else. But that had a lot of depth to it. The third part I also enjoyed, but there was some points where the dialogue almost felt like not as naturalistic as it didn't feel as flowing and as natural as the second part, which, even though it was, it can sound a bit abstract and that which can be difficult to portray well, like typically on a philosophical discussion, is hard to portray well because it can come off like a monologue as opposed to a conversation. But it actually dealt with that pretty well in the second part. But in the third part did start feeling a little bit like that in places where it felt like more that it was a monologue being delivered as opposed to. But to be fair, actually in that specific part of the story, from what I understood from reading it the first time, like I said, this is an initial thoughts response. I think it sort of was more of a monologue. It's like a guy delivering a speech, Hal delivering a speech to journalists who ask the questions, a lot of which would be the questions that the reader probably would have in their head. Because basically, the way that this economic system is proposed in the story, it's sort of like almost like self-correcting. There's a lot to it, but basically there's an algorithmic element to the solution they propose for making better use of it. It's a lot of stuff. I'm still processing exactly everything that's going on there. But probably if you really want to, like I said, I'll probably do a separate video about the ideas in the story, because I just want to do an initial review basically. But I guess I'll leave it there. It's worth looking into. It's on Amazon. I'll put the link below. It's Kieran Tait's first book, so probably give him feedback if any constructive criticism. That's what I've tried to do here. I've tried to give some genuine constructive criticism. The characters in general were okay. Like they are more a obviously like a carrier for the ideas being expressed in the book. So we don't really go much into their personal lives. As I said, this is basically a sort of philosophy essay, but it's delivered via the medium of a fiction story. That's my interpretation of it. I think the narrative characterization and is sort of secondary to the. Though saying that the narrative is actually fairly well structured. I mean, it starts in one place. There is a middle. There's a definite feeling of beginning, a middle, and an end, which is a good thing. Because it's still a story, but you do get that feeling of resolution as well, actually, of course, which is incredibly important in any story. There is a conflict and there is a resolution, and not in an obvious way, but that does happen in the story. There is initial condition, which initial scenario environment was set into, initial character introduced, and I'm not going to spoil anything, but basically something changes, and then there's a middle bit. The middle bit is really the main chunk of the book, though, I'd say. So, like I said, the philosophy and the economic ideas are the main part of the book. But like I said, Kieran should pat himself on the back for this, and well done, mate, because it does actually translate these quite difficult ideas into a fairly digestible format. I mean, look, I'm going to have to read it again a few times to digest everything, but that's not really a bad thing. It's not really a criticism, to be honest. And yeah. So, well done. And yeah, check it out if any of you have been interested in any of the areas I've been talking about here. I'll leave it at that. I'm not going to give it like a star review. I don't really believe in that sort of crap. But you get a good idea of what it's about in a bit.